Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Emerge, the health podcast for busy, high performing women. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Swenson Ridley. Today, we're going to keep this short and sweet, but I wanted to do somewhat of a warm up to a live show, not show, but live event video recording. It's going to be live on Facebook that's happening on Wednesday this week. This is coming out Tuesday. So, tomorrow in our Facebook group, I'm actually going to be going live talking through. We've been focused on the thyroid this month in that group. And if you're not in there, get in there. There's a link in the show notes, but it's called Emergent Women Health Answers for Busy, High Performing Women, something like that. Emergent Women. It's the group. It's the Facebook group. Anyways, I'm going to be talking about and actually sharing examples of women that I've worked with whose labs have been, they've been told they're normal by Western medical doctors, but actually they have issues, specifically with the thyroid. And, I'd love especially if you've been wondering if you have thyroid issues, if you've ever been told you're fine, but you have symptoms, you feel like you're not fine, all of those things, definitely join me in there. It's going to be a really great conversation and just give you some real life examples so you can start to understand where the disconnect happens and what you can do to take a proactive approach with your health with this. Because here's what I want to say about labs for today. We have this great tool in medicine in general where we can run labs and find out some stuff. And there's certain times when that's really great and really helpful. And there's a lot of times, especially when it comes to our hormones in particular, and really the thyroid specifically, but a lot of others as well, where it's really not all that helpful because, and there's some reasons for that. The with the thyroid specifically, 60% at least of actual thyroid conditions out there in the world are undiagnosed. And the reason is, there's a couple of things that go into this, and this goes beyond just the thyroid, but I'm going to use that as the example. Our ranges, specifically the thyroid that we've looked at, they've been arguing about it for 30 years. And it's way too broad. I've talked about this before. And so, they've never changed it, but it's way, 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 way too broad. And they've argued about it, but especially in Western medicine, no one has agreed to change it. And so, what that means is for a lot of women, they're actually hypothyroid. Like 90% of people who have a thyroid issue have a hypo version where it's underactive and it's being misdiagnosed. So that's like the first part of the problem. The other part of the problem with thyroid and with other things is we tend to look at things as, especially in the Western medical world, we compartmentalize everything. And so nothing is related. But with the thyroid, like there's actually a lot of different parts of a thyroid. And what I'm going to be sharing on Wednesday in the group is, looking at labs where you would have been told, like if you were that person, they would have been told that they were normal. Their thyroid was normal. Mine own labs is an example of this. I shared those on Facebook yesterday. The problem is we don't look at function. We look at a bell curve of a sick population. And so if you think about the people who are getting labs done, they're usually people who have symptoms, right? And so normal is defined as, a normal within that dysfunctional population, really, if we're looking at, just the body's optimal function. So when we look at things like in the functional medicine world, which is more where I come from, and even in the coaching world, we're looking at where do your levels need to be to just function normally, like be actually what's actually normal, optimal function, like have your body working right and not just an average of a sick population. So all this to say, if you've had labs done in the past, if you felt frustrated by being told that you're fine, this has happened to me so many times. And I can't tell you how frustrating it is because it's like, something's wrong. You don't feel well. You feel like something's off, but you keep being told, oh, you're fine. Oh, you're fine. Oh, you're fine. And I've had women who've experienced this even with Western, or not with Western medical doctors, but with functional medicine doctors who are still looking at ranges and telling people, being told that they're fine and they know that something's really wrong. So there's a couple of things I want you to take away from all of this. One is, labs are a tool that we have, and they're a great tool, but they're only a piece of the picture. We tend to just look at labs, and if the labs are fine, it's like, oh, your symptoms don't matter. There's nothing wrong with you. And that's not actually the case. We have to really be like, if you have symptoms, it's your body's way of saying that, hey, something's not right here, and we need to pay attention to this. And by the time you get to that point, it's probably been there for a while. So I don't want you to feel like if you've had labs and been told you're fine, like oh, I must be fine, but I still feel terrible. I would take the feeling terrible as more of a avenue of looking at what could be like more of a window into, yeah, something's actually going on here. And then it becomes, unfortunately, because of the way Western medicine works, and short of working with somebody like me, we really have to be willing to go on a discovery, if you want, of figuring out, what's going on and where things are off and where things are wrong. And that can look like a lot of different things. One of the tools I use that's a non-laboratory tool in my practice is I do a toxicity assessment. It's like 400 questions. I'll be honest, it takes a little while to get through it, but it gives a good idea of, where is dysfunction happening in the body. Is it with your colon, with your small intestine? Do you have SIBO? Do you have a mitochondrial issue, which is going to cause issues with energy being produced? I'm going to talk more about this another week. Do you have, some gut issues? Do you have parasites? Do you have food allergies or sensitivities that have been undiagnosed? I'll say some more about food allergy testing in just a moment. There's a lot of different things that can be impacting how you feel that aren't necessarily going to show up in the levels on a lab. What I want you to really take from this, join us in the group on Wednesday, because you'll start to see, where we fall short with just how we look at some of these things. And B, if you don't want to do this all on your own, it's really about finding who's going to be a good fit for you to help you go on this exploratory process. Could be me, could be somebody else. If you want to just chat and find out about what it is that I do in terms of the world of lab testing, where I'm really trying to, take us from having that, oh, you're fine, oh, you're fine, oh, you're fine, oh, I'm not fine, oh, no, you're really not fine now because we just waited long enough experience to, really getting a firm understanding of like what's going on and what you need to focus on to really be functioning optimally, which is why I utilize labs. And I specifically tend to look at things like the thyroid, your sex hormones, vitamin D levels. Occasionally I'll look at insulin resistance and A1C. There's a lot of different things. And very rarely I will look at food sensitivity. And the reason why that's very rarely is there's a couple of, the other thing you really want to be aware of is like what's worth your time and money and what is maybe going to be a waste. And not to say that all those things out there are going to be a waste of time and money, but there's certain things like food sensitivity testing, for example, has a really hard time being really specific. And there's different types of food sensitivity testing. There's, the type your allergists will do, where they will actually do skin pricks for foods. Typically, not much is going to register on there because very few of us have an anaphylactic type allergy to a food. And that's what that's testing. And so that's testing the like big allergic reaction where, you could hit the point of like dying from that food, right? And so some people have that to like chocolate and strawberries are some of the ones I've seen. That's not very common though. Most likely the things that are causing inflammation and problems with our gut health, with our thyroid, with our, body functioning and all of that usually have a different type of reaction, which is called a delayed hypersensitivity reaction. And so what these are is when we have different antibodies that are produced. So there's an IgG and an IG. Let's see, we've got IgA, IgG, and IgE. And typically food sensitivity testing is going to test the IgG version. And while that's all well and good, it's not very sensitive. And even a lot of the studies and things that are out there, I am one of many practitioners who have moved away from utilizing some of it. I would much rather do, an elimination diet and gradually add things back in and just test it on yourself to see what you really react to. Because a lot of times either your body's already in hyper reactive mode, and so it's going to react to like everything on the list. So if you've ever experienced, either you've been told you're fine or you suddenly like can't eat anything, even apples or something crazy, like that's a sign that there's some systemic inflammation going on. And it's not actually that you have a sensitivity or an allergy to that thing. So that's, one part of that. And two, that stuff can change over time. And so while, that can be a tool if you don't really want to do the elimination thing, it's not necessarily where I put my focus when I'm working with women in just how we test and what we look for and all of that stuff. So all this to say, I've been a little bit all over the place with this, but if you have had the experience, I just want you to think about it. We tend to rely on labs and doctors as being omnipotent, all-knowing beings. And so if the labs don't show it, then like nothing can be wrong. And a lot of times that's not actually the case. And I've laid out some of the reasons why. Our lab ranges are based on sick people. Our testing tends to be compartmentalized, and not everything is looked at in conjunction with what can actually be going on. And so it's really about bringing this broader approach and understanding to your own body and what all this stuff means, and what tools you really need to start to understand yourself. Some of us need the validation of a lab, others don't. And you just need to decide, like, okay, can I just say, like, symptomatically, this is, I assume, what I've got going on, or do I need that validation of a lab to look at? Or is someone totally missing something because they haven't been looking at enough pieces of the pie? This is what I'm going to be talking about on Wednesday, going over thyroid labs that would have been called normal based on what they normally test, which is just TSH. But I go further to look at free T4, free T3, and antibodies as well. And, it actually, we have examples of real life people that I've worked with. You're not going to find out any of their information or anything, but that have had the experience of being told they're fine when really they're actually not, and what it takes to really dig deep enough to find those answers. So if this is of any interest to you at all, please join the Facebook group. It'll be live in there. You can watch it whenever I go live at noon on Wednesdays. Every Wednesday, we got topics for each month. This month, we're focused on the thyroid. This is September. Recordings will be up in there for a while if you can't make it live, but please try to make it live, because then the following week, I'm actually going to be doing a Q&A and just answering all questions specifically around the thyroid before we move into our next topic for next month. But that's number one. Number two, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, Dr. Alex, my doctor has only ever done compartmentalized things, or they always tell me I'm fine and I don't feel fine, any of that, I would love to just chat with you and help point you in a direction. This is not a sales call. This is nothing like that. There's a link in the show notes. You can jump on my schedule. We'll talk for like 15 or 20 minutes, just long enough for me to get an idea of what's going on, what you're dealing with, and help give you some direction. Maybe it's around what tests you should ask your doctor to do if you like them and want to keep working with them, or if you're looking for a new approach, I can share more of what that actually looks like. But this is available to you as a listener, and as just something I do to help serve. So again, not a sales thing. Jump on my calendar. The link is really weird, so I'm just going to put it in the show notes. It's there if you'd like it. And we will see you hopefully on Wednesday inside the group. Please get in there if you haven't joined that yet. I know not everyone loves Facebook these days, but I try to make that worth your while, and we have lots of great stuff and content and conversation going on in there all the time. And I will see you next week.